Howdy, Central Oregon. Hello, Central Oregon, and welcome to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm your host, and that's Fred Johnson. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm almost a little bit nervous. You know, I was interrupted last week because of the duck game, and so it's been a couple of weeks since we've been on the air, and boy, it's just been beautiful. The fall has absolutely illuminated our city, and we're so darn blessed to live here. I hope that you're out there enjoying the fall foliage. I think this weekend we have the Roots Festival happening down near the Deschutes Brewery. That's certainly worth taking in. That's I think there's 100 bands playing on 6 different stages over the next couple of days. So if you feel the urge to get out and have a little bit of fun, you may want to do that. And if you can't make it this week, next week is the Fall Festival. So, but you know, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Last time we were here, we had a young man named Mike called in, and we were talking about some of the urban growth boundary issues and all of that. And some of your play were when you folks contact me at on my email, which is fred@dukewarner.com. It's been interesting that maybe some of the topics that we've been talking about may be a little bit complex in that there's so many different facets of it. You know, and a lot of these large issues are complex, particularly when there's government process in, and it's real easy to try to find somebody, you know, the old proverbial, you know, don't shoot the messenger. It's easy maybe to blame our local television or blame the local newspaper or some of that, when in fact the process is really, really quite big. So one of the things that we're going to try to do here on the show is to bring in some professionals to explain some of those different facets moving forward. And I'm going to kind of focus a little bit more on some real estate information that you can use. You know, like today, I think we're going to talk a little bit about home inspections. And there was also an interesting article today about the difference between appraisals and assessments. And they're two different functions on our real estate, and they're used for two different things. And I think it might be, we too will have someone come. I've got an appraiser lined up to come in for an interview process where, as always, you're invited to call in at 541-388-1110 and be able to discuss some of the issues. But we'll get an appraiser in here so that he can explain maybe some of the differences of the appraisal processes and, you know, what that looks like. You know, we're at a time right now to where each and every one of us have so much access to so much information that it's easy to sort of draw that assumption that we're an expert on something when, in fact, you know, the only way that we can really get a working knowledge on any one of these complex issues is from experience. And that's the reason why I say you really can't fake experience. So when you're out and you're looking for professionals to assist you with your real estate or any of those sort of things, really try to surround yourself with someone that has at least got the working knowledge that they've only gained by actually doing the job. And, you know, one of the things that we'll do today is we'll talk about that a little bit, particularly with a home inspection, how not only the experience of the home inspector, but also the experience of the brokers that are trying to put the deal together, because there's some different facets and some different items that are added on there that you know, actually take a little bit of insight to maybe minimize the expectations of both the buyer and the seller. So I'm looking forward to getting on and talking with that. But we'll leave sort of those complex issues like the UGB and the SDCs and Parks and Rec and affordable housing. We'll certainly touch on those, but try a little bit more to maybe bring in some professionals that can, you know, shed a little bit of direct light on those topics, because they are, in fact, so complex that there's not just a real easy fix. You know, today, starting out with a little bit of good news, it's pretty fun that an article just came out this week on street.com where Realty Tracker has found that October is the very best month of the year to purchase a home. Considering the start of school, October is a very opportune time, and oftentimes the sellers are a little bit more motivated this time of year to maybe look at a different offer, with the winter months being a little bit slower, and some people may not want to hold on to their properties through the market, or through the winter, excuse me. And not to mention, you know, the weather as well. So, and one of the interesting side tidbits that came out in that article as well that I didn't realize previously, but October is the only month where all 4 major professional sports are in season or in their preseason. So those of you that are sitting on the sofa with your remote control in your hand, you might want to get up and go out and buy a house. It's a good time to do that. Another article came out this week that said that the Oregon tax system is the second fairest in the country. And, some states don't have sales tax, which obviously is the case here in Oregon. They analyzed 50 states for state and local taxes. Everyone agrees that, the fair tax system would be, to tax the wealthy and take it a little bit easy on the poor. But unfortunately, when you look across the current tax statements, most Americans believe that we should have a progressive tax statement. But every state has a regressive tax. And Oregon was rated number 2 in the entire country, only following Montana, which I thought was really quite an interesting tidbit. Sometimes we get, I think, a little consumed with the fact that things are getting more expensive here in Bend, and we think that we're getting priced out of the market from a number of different ways. But I thought that was pretty interesting. And another question that I'm asked an awful lot is, are we on the verge of another bubble? Are we looking at another real estate bubble so that we're going to lose, a lot of value in our homes and that? And according to Matt Garner from a Seattle-based Windermere, absolutely not is his answer. Absolutely not. With the new conditions, lenders are requiring better tax scores, larger down payments, and the folks that are getting a home today are responsibly taking on that debt. Where previously we had what were called stated income loans, where basically someone could go in and tell them that they were making as much money as they wanted to claim, and they weren't responsibly taking on debt. So according to Matt Garner, not only is the market healthy again, but as I've been saying in recent weeks, we're starting to see a little slowdown in the housing appreciation. We're getting to where maybe we've worked a little bit through the backlog of people. People are being a little bit more responsible as they're taking on debt, and it's a good thing. It makes for a good market, both for new construction as well as for existing construction. We're seeing that there's not that frenzied sense that if I don't get it now, I'm not going to get it. So we're getting multiple offers. It's really starting to stabilize a fair amount. I think in the upper reaches of the market, we're seeing prices coming really close to replacement costs, in some places getting below replacement costs. And that's just the cost of what it takes to buy a land, buy the materials, pay for the labor, pay your SDCs, and to be able to produce a home. And that's always a good benchmark for valuations, because, what we see going forward is that the likelihood of materials getting less expensive, or land getting less expensive, or the taxes lowering, or labor lowering probably isn't very real. So obviously the developer needs to make a profit when he's building these properties, but a lot of those fixed expenses are really leading to what's going forward. So when we come back after the break, I guess I can sneak this in a little bit. The consensus just basically says that Bend is growing fast. I think that we already know that it's growing fastest among the 8 largest cities in the state, and out of 574 large cities throughout the country, Bend was rated number 4. So a lot of people are moving here for lifestyle, obviously, and there's a little bit of discrepancy on whether Oregon was rated number 16th or number 1 by United Van Lines. When we come back, we'll talk about Zillow, and we'll talk about home inspections and some other things. Again, you're tuned in to Ask or Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson, and I look forward to seeing you after the break, and we'll get into it. You're always welcome to call 541-388-1110. Welcome back. You're with Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. I'm your host, Fred Johnson. And thank you so much for tuning in on this beautiful autumn day. Hope you're out there having some fun and taking all that Bend has to offer in. So right before the break, one of the things that I shared with you that I just want to clarify just a little bit was we were talking about Bend growing and the state of Oregon growing, and I kind of mixed up the statistics there just a little bit. And growth isn't just specific to Bend. It's the state of Oregon is 16th in the country. as far as growth. We're enjoying a fair amount of growth statewide. They had 8,300 new people move into the city of Portland for a 1% growth. Now, Bend is slightly doubled that at 2.1%. And then a very near runner-up is the Beaverton-Hillsboro area, which is growing at 1.7%. So it's there's a lot of people moving to Oregon for a lot of reasons, and one is that I think the thing that we always need to be mindful of as we're looking at this is Oregon really by and large is quite a sparsely populated state, and so the numbers are skewed a little bit just by virtue of the scale, in that it's a lot easier to impact a town with only 10 people in it than it is a town with 1 million people in it. So when we're looking at those stats and that information, just be mindful that we're talking about a large state with not many people, and people are going to continue to move into our area. I'm thinking that I might have somebody calling us here today. Let's see what that looks like. Hello, this is Fred. You're on the air.
Fred, this is Mike calling from outside Bend, Oregon.
Yes, sir, Mike.
Oh, but since you mentioned me by name, perhaps you were, maybe you'd like to talk about something other than the local real estate.
Well, I like talking about real estate.
Okay, here's what I got. I'd like to jump right into it to respect your time.
Let's see what you got.
I believe that you forage into the very big topics, and that's why I call. One thing is that human beings tend to be unable to figure out scale or size.
Yes.
So they don't really, if you ask someone, well, how many houses should we stick on an acre? Most people can't conceive of what an acre is.
Right.
Convert it. The same thing.
43,560 square feet.
There you go. See, well, I knew you knew. But anyway, to get to my point, that scale blindness has certain evidences or proofs, if I might be so bold. One is the sage grouse. The sage grouse has about half the United States, everything west of the Rocky Mountains.
Yes, sir.
But you can't find Bend, Oregon on a map. But the continual idea is that humans are somehow bad in altering the landscape so profoundly that we should respect the chicken. Well, what's really going on is land is continually being bloated upwards in cost, even though there's plenty of it, by this fake concept that there's a lack of land or that humans are innately bad for the environment.
Well, Mike, you're bringing up a whole host of issues, and
Indeed.
and which I really appreciate. But the state of Oregon with LCDC has. And, a lot of people don't realize that 82% of Deschutes County is publicly owned land. It's either Bureau of Land Management or National Forest. So, we can't just have urban sprawl that goes out forever. And
well, that's the key catchphrase that people use, sprawl. I was trying since 2005 to help the city of Bend expand 2 square miles of the UGB. Not sprawl across the United States, just 2 square miles.
But going through that, Mike, if I may,
that UGB, we still haven't passed that UGB, Fred. I just want to point out, it's 10 years later, we still haven't passed what the will of the people was. Oh,
I'm fully aware of that, and one of the things that was really great about the legislation that Newt Bueller brought forward was that we could accept portions of that application of the UGB. See, one of the major problems, and it really, quite honestly, doesn't get much press, with the last expansion proposal that the city put forward to LCDC, was that they wanted to incorporate, and I believe it's in the area where you're talking about expanding, they wanted to bring in some EFU zone land, some exclusive farm use zone land, which was directly not in compliance with the document that allows for urban growth boundary expansion. Urban growth boundary expansion is to keep forest land in forest and keep rural land, exclusive farm use land, in production. So there needs to be sort of a transitional stage, which they call the urban area reserve, to bring that in.
Sure. I happen to be right on the edge of the UAR, so I have no dog in this fight except to watch my fellow Bend citizens suffer from a faked lack of land causing unaffordable housing. And then once Salem soaks the capital of Bend's ability to operate, it rushes in with an affordable housing solution that taxes us more, when the entire problem is Salem is forcing us to pretend there's a lack of land. That 1 square mile that the Deschutes County gave or sold to Bend for $1 is one example, and it's so seldom noticed that, hey, I'm not some secret company. I just want us citizens to have affordable land so that my kids, your kids, all our friends can go buy a lot somewhere around a university or expanded wonderful city and thrive instead of suffer. Like, here's one example, Fred, and I'll be off the phone.
Okay.
If you allowed, let's just imagine that you're Salem and you could allow it. If you let everyone have a double-sized lot so you could actually eventually put 2 homes instead of 1, well, that person could get a loan and pay off their loan by densifying just exactly as the city desires and Salem wants, except we wouldn't all be beholden to the bank for decades at a time unnecessarily just because of a fake lack of land. And Fred, thank you so much for letting me speak my piece. I can't say how much I appreciate it.
Well, Mike, we really appreciate you calling in, and I'm certain that our listeners like to hear your point. And so please don't be a stranger and feel free to call in again.
Good day.
Thanks so much. Good day, sir. Well, as you can see, that a lot of the issues here in Central Oregon, we've all got a little different perspective on how those things look moving forward. And one of the flaws with the expansion of the urban growth boundary in the past was that it needed to be a totally comprehensive plan that was either all accepted or all rejected. And quite honestly, that's where we have been. That basically, and I'm not going to go off on a whole lot of this, but basically, if you look at the city of Bend and you realize that out on the northeast corner is where our sewage treatment facility is located. It's flat, easy digging. It's real easy to get to it. There's a whole bunch of flat land out there that's easy to build and easy to dig. And from a rational perspective, that looks like a great way to go as far as expanding the city. But because a lot of that land is EFU zoned, it will take a minimum of another cycle. So it would take a minimum of 10 to 15 years before that land could potentially be available. And so with this pent-up demand, basically by not expanding the urban growth boundary, what it's like is it's sort of like putting the lid on boiling water, and it starts to bring up the pressure. And so what that creates is more core area density, more vertical. We're seeing an awful lot of that now. We're seeing a lot of applications for raising the height ceiling from 30 feet to 40 feet to 45 feet. A lot of people feel very strongly about maintaining the visibility of our mountains from everywhere and maintaining our skyline, keeping relatively low. But if we're going to have a limited amount of land and we're going to continue to increase the population within that land, there's only 2 things that we can do. We can increase the density and put people closer together, or we can go vertical and start to stack them on top of one another. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays and how that goes forward. And during the time that that's all happening, it seems that a lot of emphasis is being placed on the streetscape, how it looks on the street, how wide the bicycle lanes are, how wide the sidewalks are. We're going to put median strips in, and basically restricting the traffic flow right before the population density is increased in those same areas. And it seems to be that it's not too, from my perspective, too forward thinking on urban planning, what that's going to look like moving forward. And if we double the population in this square mile or square 2 miles or whatever it is, how are the streets, the bicycle paths, the sidewalks, and all of that not only going to handle the traffic, but also be able to have the appropriate emergency response times for both people getting in and people getting out? Hello, welcome back. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm your host. You're listening to Talk Real Estate. Number here at the station, 541-388-1110. So before the break, I said that we were going to talk a little bit about Zillow, something you should know about Zillow. This article came out by MarketWatch this week, and I think that it's really, really quite interesting because I must admit I direct some of my customers to Zillow. They have a wonderful mapping tool. It's really an easy way to sort of get some basic raw information, and I stress the word raw information because you need to realize that the information, there's all these new words. It's aggregated by an algorithms that collate different information and then put it together and present it in such a manner that it looks very, very factual, very real time, and very correct and accurate, when in fact sometimes it's not quite as accurate. And the presumption is, I think sometimes, with all of us as we go online, if we see it online, it must be factual. And I'm not here to dispute the factual component of it, but I'm here to once again, and per this article, shed a little light on what Zillow's business plan is. What do? They sell advertisement. They try to generate leads, and they try to connect those leads with the people that are buying the advertisement. And so one of the things that was interesting here in this article was that, consumer advocates, I'm going to step out just a little bit here to explain agency. Agency is the relationship that you have with your broker, who your broker is representing. Is your broker representing you exclusively, or in the case of dual agency, is the broker trying to represent both the buyer and the seller? And that's something that needs to be disclosed. There's nothing wrong with it. If an agent wants to represent both the buyer and the seller, and it's agreeable to both the buyer and seller, then you can do that. But it's somewhat, another analogy of that would be, it's like a for sale by owner. Just because the seller has decided that they choose not to be represented by a broker doesn't necessarily mean that the buyer doesn't want to be represented by a broker to help them navigate some of the many things that could come up during the transaction. So what they're discovering is that nearly 60% of the Zillow agents that are doing participate in dual agency relationships. And so, what that means is that, when you go to a place and you think that you're receiving real-time information, which oftentimes the properties that are available, that are currently pending, some of that lags. Industry standards are that, there's about a 30% fudge factor in some of the information that comes out. But the reality is that they're in the business of lead generation. And they're an industry business, or the business of transactions and not necessarily people. And according to this Market Watch, for most people, it's a good idea to avoid dual agency relationships. I'm not saying that it's not agreeable and sometimes, but oftentimes if you're going to get into a situation where you're negotiating something, maybe it's a repair, and is it worth $500? Is it worth $1,000? You can't help but to look at the party that's trying to help you negotiate that and wonder if they were really just looking out for themselves, or if they really had your best interest in mind. So when you go to Zillow, realize what Zillow is. Zillow is information. It's sort of the 30,000-foot flyover, if you will, for a market, but that's nothing that you should really be able to take home as value. Truly in value. And if we're going to talk about value a little bit, let's talk about the article that came out in the Bend Bulletin today. It was on the front of the real estate page, and it said appraisals versus assessments. And there's a difference between an appraisal and an assessment. And I think that one of the things that we all need to know is this is not an exact science. It's a little bit subjective. The appraisal process is a little bit more hands-on, if you will, in that the appraiser actually comes out and does a physical inspection of the property, thereby gets to see some of the amenities that have been added, the hardwood cabinetry, the stone counters, some of those sort of things that are very, very nice, which the assessment process doesn't really allow for that. And the assessment process is the process that is used to arrive at your taxable value. So let me just kind of explain just a little bit. We do have an appraiser that's lined up. He's going to come in and share with us some of the different things, because there's basically three basic models of arriving at coming up with market value. One obviously is the comparative analysis approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. Now, basically what those mean is the cost approach is one sort of like I lined out a little bit in the last segment, where you take the sum total of the building materials and the labor and the land cost and the fees, and you put that together, and it comes up with, what is an actual cost per square foot to replicate a similar property. And that's often used just to give a sort of a baseline. And the other one that's used, quite frankly, is the comparative market analysis. Comparative market analysis it's really, really easy in, sort of tract-like developments where there's a lot of similarity. One of the terms I used to love from real estate called homogeneous integrity. But the homogeneous integrity of a neighborhood means that you either had the floor plan A, B, or C, and the garage was either left or right. Well, those properties are really, really easy in a comparative analysis to compare with one another. Some of the other properties that may be a little more dissimilar, may have been built at different times, have different size lots, different finishes. There's sort of a process there where you sort of push and pull on the values to sort of arrive at a value. And the income approach is basically a cash flow analysis. If you're looking at the property not so much as the structure, that has some value. The replacement cost obviously has some value. If you're going to buy a building that's generating income, you'd like to know how much it would cost to build another one of those buildings. But generally, they use a thing called capitalization rates, which is a relationship between the net operating income and the overall sales price. So, and there's a number of different ways to go through the cost approach. There's gross rent multipliers, there's internal rate of return, there's a number of different ones, and obviously we could take an entire hour just talking about the different approaches, and maybe we'll save that for our appraiser when he comes in. But the bottom line to us today is that it's an opinion of value. It's a snapshot of the value of a property on a given day at a given time. It doesn't factor in that it's in the path of development, that there's some discussion that there may be a zone change in the neighborhood. It doesn't factor in any of that. It's just a snapshot and an opinion of value here and today. And, that's used for a number of different things. It's used for everything from putting your mortgage loans together to estates, to divorces. Unfortunately, there's a number of different times that we need to arrive at some opinion of value so that hopefully the interested parties can come to some resolution in whatever may be going, or secure the financing that they're looking for at that time. Now, that's all appraisal. Now, on the assessment side is what the tax assessor, in our case, Deschutes County tax assessor, places a value on the property. Now, I know that you've all received a tax statement, and you're about to receive another one here at the beginning of November, and maybe this is a good time to talk about it. But it's basically a window of time that runs from July 1 to July 1. So the time of value that we're talking about is actually July 1 to last July, and the value during that window of time, but you received the statement in November. A little confusing. Not really. I don't think it was designed to be confusing, but that's just how the process works. And then, of course, there's now also on your tax statement, there's a real market value, and there's also an assessed value, and that's sort of a factor of Measure 50, which was voted in by the Oregon legislature in 1997. I guess when we're going to come back here after the break, I'll be able to talk about that just a little bit, but I think we can squeeze it in here. Basically what happens with that is the assessment sort of runs with trend rates, and it's trending a value of both the land and of the improvement, and it allows it to move forward. They're mandated by the state constitution to have that physical assessment every 6 years, which is generally when a white Deschutes County truck appears across the street and takes a picture of your house. So obviously they don't know if you have hardwood cabinets and granite countertops and all of that. And then the other is the real market value and the assessed value. So whichever is the lower is the multiplier that's going to be used to arrive at your taxes. And if you disagree with that, you have until December 31st to go online with Deschutes County and to go have what they call an equalization hearing, to where you get to present that information. Obviously, a very recent sale and settlement statement is a very, very good way to establish that value. So when we come back after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about home inspections, and at that time we're always willing to take in calls. 541-388-1110. Thanks for tuning in to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson. Hello, welcome back. Welcome back after the break. Well, I guess I don't get Werewolf of London anymore. They changed my bumper music. I was getting ready to howl in the phone. Those of you that have listened in the past may know that, but anyway, we'll work it out. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We're here at the station. You can always contact us, 541-388-1110. You can always email me direct if you have any questions, concerns, topics that you would like to hear discussed or issues. That's fred@dukewarner.com. Real easy, and I'll respond. And I really appreciate all your input. Appreciate your call-ins. So, one of the things that you're going to hear a little bit more from me, I think, as a sort of a call line, if you will, is that you can't fake experience, and I think that it's becoming increasingly clear as every time that our market gets a little strong here in Bend, everybody sort of runs right in. We have a whole bunch of people that are passing the tests and starting their career, and my hat's off to them. But just because you received your license recently doesn't necessarily mean that you have the working knowledge to be able to negotiate some of the different things that you will encounter moving forward. And that same experience applies to a lot of different service providers and professionals that are out there that are going to help you navigate, for most people, what is the largest transaction, largest purchase that they make in their lifetime. And one of the things that comes up is home inspections. And home inspections, I think this is a really good topic. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to squeeze in enough of it here before the end of the show today. But the good news for absolutely everybody, home inspectors alike, is that here beginning October 1st, just this next week, 2015, the home inspectors are going to be required to take a national test. Once again, the testing doesn't necessarily give them the great working knowledge, but it at least allows some level of compliance coming in, which quite honestly, we haven't had in the past. So there's been a number of different ways that people have found themselves to the home inspection industry. Some of them are contractors that have been in the contracting business for a while, hopefully, and made the transition, whether they were near retirement years and decided they didn't want to, pack the materials around quite so much, or, for whatever reason, they found themselves coming from the construction industry into the home inspection industry. And then another way, quite honestly, is that you could buy a local franchise, and there's a number of franchises. You can go online. The thing that's really nice about the franchise approach is that, all of the collaterals, they call them, all of the logo, the materials, the report, the software, everything is really quite well laid out and looks very, very professional, but that doesn't necessarily reflective of the technician that's actually handling the job. And believe me, I'm not here to bash anyone at all. I'm just simply saying that, when the time comes, as I recommend to most of my purchasers, I think that a home inspection is absolutely the best insurance that you can purchase when purchasing a new home. It's the equivalent of buying a used car and taking it to your mechanic. You're going to have somebody that's going to crawl under the house and look around for, wet spots or water damage or mold or mildew or any number of things under the house, crawl up in the attic space, check the water pressure, check the polarity, look in your electrical box, do a lot of those things that, most of us, quite honestly, don't really know how to test. And for $300 plus whatever it may be, it's a heck of a lot less expensive than finding a malady that could cost thousands of dollars to repair. And it's really nice to know going in exactly what that means. But many times, if you have an inspector, sometimes, particularly the franchise type inspectors, they will go to seminars that is designed to train them and give them training so that they'll be better served to go out in the field and provide better services for their customers. But sometimes there's a little bit of an alarmist approach that comes to it. And on the other side, in the reports, it can create unrealistic expectations on the buyer side of the deal, where, sometimes I see that an inspection report will come out and there'll be 45 items on it. And the buyer will just respond with, yeah, I want all 45 of those fixed. And sometimes some of the items, quite honestly, are actually, boilerplate items. They're items that are written in sort of as a safeguard for the home inspector. One of them that we have here very frequently here in Bend is rodents. There's probably not a house in Central Oregon that doesn't have some mouse droppings in the attic. And so there's a boilerplate item that's on there that says that, hey, there's signs of rodents, and you may want to have somebody come and take a look at it. Well, that's going to be on almost every one of your reports. It doesn't mean that you have an infestation problem. It just means that, in the event there does and you're concerned about it, you might want to go to that degree and have that looked into. Insect wings, a number of different issues come up, electrical panels, a number of things come up. And quite honestly, in my practice, weather stripping and caulking is another really big one. I think that it's fair as a buyer to look at something or, sort of draw a line, if you will, in the middle to where there's some health and safety issues that obviously those are the seller's responsibility. Those need to get done. Some of the other things are sort of normal wear and tear, normal maintenance issues that go along with the house. And in most cases, you're not buying a new home. So to expect the seller to put a brand new roof on, completely paint and caulk all the windows, change out the floor coverings, put in, obviously they're going to put in smoke detectors and CO detectors and fix the hand railings on everything and all that. That may not be a very realistic expectation. However, it's all written into the report, and this is where having a seasoned broker working with you can help you navigate that just a little bit and say, hey, well, here's this. Let's go take a look at it. Let's have a contractor go over and take a look at what the repair might be so that we know what we're getting into before we go. But those items moving forward, it really helps to have, again, that working knowledge, that experience of being there, to be able to separate which of the items are real life issues that really need to be dealt with and which of the items are written into the report to basically protect, if you will, the inspector, so that there's not any recourse that they didn't disclose or didn't do that. So you can see there's sort of it's a bit of a tightrope, but to go through a home inspection report line by line sometimes is not particularly well served. I can give you one personal example that was pretty interesting, and it took us a good while to work through it. We did keep it together, and the people did buy the home. But the inspector had called out for flashing above all of the doors and windows in the house. Now, generally in residential real estate, what we do is we bring the siding up to the windows and frame everything and then caulk everything and paint it. And that's generally the way window openings are dealt with in residential housing. Well, it looks like they're going to try to run me out of here a little bit early. I didn't see that coming. But I've got another minute here. But anyway, long story short, they told me that they wanted to replace all that flashing, which would have necessitated taking all the siding off the house, putting in the flashing, putting all the siding back on, and repainting the house, which, as many of you can see, is pretty unrealistic. So again, I want to thank you for tuning in. Talk Real Estate. You can always drop me an email at fred@dukewarner.com. I hope you get out there and have some fun. I hope I mentioned enough times that the Roots Festival is going on. And you get out there and have yourself some fun.
KBND FM News 100.